Hi, this is Troxel. In today's tutorial we're going to continue looking at track motion, only this time we're going to turn on to the 3D track motion. So let's set up our project. First of all, we're going to add a second track and turn 3D track motion on it as well. And then we're going to see how the two tracks interact with each other as we modify the top track, starting with the same settings that we used in the last tutorial, but continuing on with the 3D settings in this tutorial. So let's see how that works. Here we have our same video clip that we had the last time, and our track motion is set here, but up here in this section here, instead of being source alpha or any of the other 2D options, we're turning on 3D source alpha. When we turn on 3D source alpha, we get all of these extra views that we can see. So when we rotate things, we can see it both from the top, the left, the front, and the perspective. So we would make our modifications in any of these windows if we were doing it manually. But we're going to do it by a script. So now I've added a video clip to the second video track as well, and I also have 3D source alpha selected for this one as well. So both of these are in 3D space. Looking at our code, let's go back and see what we did last time. We found our track, we converted it to a video track, we got the first keyframe for the motion from that track, and then we displayed the information. We're going to continue displaying the information at each step. Then we changed the width, the height, the position X, the position Y, orientation Z, rotation offset X, rotation offset Y, and then the rotation. After all of those were changed, now we're going to look at the 3D options. The first thing we're going to look at is the depth. Let's first change it to a -50, then we're going to put it at actual 0, and then let's move it back to the default of 54. Next we're going to change the position Z. I'm going to move it to -100, +100, and then back to the default of 0. Then we're going to look at the orientation X. I'm going to change the orientation to 15 and then bring it back to 0. Same thing with the orientation Y. Change it to 15 and then bring it back to 0. That way we can see how it's going to rotate in the 3D space. Next I'm going to change the rotation offset. Let's just move it 30 in the Z direction. Then we're going to change the rotation X just like we did the orientation X. We're going to rotate it 15 and bring it back to 0, then rotation Y, take it to 15, and then bring it back to 0. And those are the 3D options that we can change. So let's see how that works. I'm going to open the 3D track motion so we can see all these settings change as we run the script. So these are just the default values right here that we were using before. We're going to click on OK. Now we have changed the width, changed the height, changed the position X, changed the position Y. This changed the orientation Z so that it rotated to the right. Next we changed the rotation offset X, which we can see in the perspective window. Change the rotation offset Y, which we can also see in the perspective window. We can also see it in the front window. And then we did a rotation Z, which rotated it around that rotation offset point. Now we're going to get to the 3D settings. The first thing we're going to do is change the depth to -50. Change it to 0. Change it to +54. Back to the default. We could see some changes in the top window up here as that was happening, but the changes did not change anything on the actual display screen. Next we're going to change the position Z to -100. So that brought it forward a little bit. Now we're going to change it to +100. that made it disappear. The reason it disappeared is because it's actually behind the other video track now. So if we bring it back to 0, now it is back in front of the video track behind it. Now let's change the orientation X to 15. So we actually rotated it 15 degrees, and you can see the part that rotated behind the other image disappeared. The part that is rotated in front of the image is still there. So let's bring that back to 0. Now we're going to change the orientation Y. Once again, the part that rotated behind the other window disappeared. The other part is still in front of the window so we can see it. Another thing to note is down here where it says orientation X, Y, and Z, our first number here is 4.11594 blah 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 E minus 16. That's essentially 0. For some reason the number is not precisely 0 anymore, but it's very close. When we click OK to bring the other number back to 0, we'll notice that it is also a number that is very, very, very small, which is essentially 0. 1.10347657 blah 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 E minus 32. That E minus 32 means times 10 to the negative 32nd. So think of it as 31 zeros in front of that first one, and think of the other one as 15 zeros in front of that first 4. So it's a very, very, very small 0, which is essentially 0. Next, we're going to change the rotation offset, and we're going to change that to minus 30. If you looked at the perspective window, that little dot got just a little bit smaller, which means that the rotation offset went back just a little bit. So now let's change the rotation X to 15. And you can see most of the image is now behind the other video track because most of it is now gone. So if we bring that back to 0, now we're going to change the rotation Y to 15. And just a little bitty bit of it disappeared behind the other video track. And then the rest is still visible because it is still in front. And then move that back to 0. So as you can see with the script, we can determine the 3D space as well as the 2D space, and we can determine how much of it is visible behind another video track as long as both of them have 3D source alpha turned on. If it's rotated in such a way that part of it is behind the lower track, then that part will disappear. Likewise, if everything is in front of the other track, you'll see the whole thing. So you can move it in 3D space, you can move it over time in 3D space, you can change the angles in 3D space, and we can do all that from a script as we have seen in this tutorial. Please sign up at www.JETDV.com and subscribe on YouTube to get further notifications on when new videos are presented.